Okay, back to finish our discussion on taxonomy. So you should now be familiar with the idea of what a species is, how a species name would be sort of designated, the genus, the epithet, italicized, underlined. Um, so that falls within the realm of taxonomy. Yeah? Now, historically, there was the first strategy of taxonomy. So we're going to look at taxonomical strategies since sort of humans have started this idea of organizing and categorizing. We look at the idea of morphology. So looking at external parts, visible characteristics, biometrics, measuring how long, how many. So this is what people would see. They would see a snake with a rattle on the tail. They would see a snake that could hood up on the neck. They would see a snake with big fangs, a snake with stripes or blotches. They would see a plant with yellow flowers or a plant with uh, red fruits. They would see, these different types of organisms, insects with stingers, insect with little stripes, insect with wings, insects with no wings, worms with no legs. So all of this would be morphology. So let's look at this, and then we'll get into the idea of phylogeny. But morphology and biometrics leads to its own vocabulary. Each organism would have different parts, different body segments, different numbers, different names, and it can get kind of elaborate, kind of tedious. Um, and people that specialize in scorpions have their own vocabulary. People that work with insects have their own vocabulary. People that work with jellyfish have their own vocabulary, their own morphological sort of vocabulary, all of the body parts. Yeah. So this was, again, historically how taxonomy was conducted. Carolus Linnaeus used morphology to organize his different categories, right, to build up all of these phylogenetic levels, right? That was historically the way it was done. So when we look at morphology, this is going to be something that helps you throughout the semester, is to have an eye that can look for differences, right? Why are these organisms in different categories? Well, because they're going to have very minor morphological differences. So if you can compare between picture A and picture B, left and right, can you find a couple of differences here? There should be a few differences between these two. So I'm not going to tell you which ones they are right now. I'll let you look for those, but some of you have a good eye for that. You can find differences very easily. Some of you are going to struggle a little bit with that, right? On the other side of the coin, we have to be able to find similarities in things that are not very similar looking, right? You're going to have organisms that look very different, but are in the same category. You say, well, why? They look morphologically, they look different. Why would they be in the same category? So we have to have the ability to find similarities, right? So what is the similarity between a T-Rex and a baby? At first, we might not think very easily that there's many similarities, but they both have earth-shaking vocal cries, tiny arms, razor-sharp fingernails, messy eaters. They have that awkward gait. So yeah, I mean, we're being a little bit facetious here, but we're going to have both skills this semester. So you have to find differences and things that don't look like they're very different, and we have to find similarities in things that are very, very different, right? And both of these skills will be important as we progress from morphology into our phylogenies. So phylogeny is a taxonomical strategy. It does involve morphology, but it goes beyond that, right? And as time progressed and we get into our modern era, we have now the technology to analyze DNA sequences. So we can take DNA from different people, from different species, and we can analyze those A's and T's and C's and G's and see how much similarity there is between them. Right? And that helps us build our taxonomical categories based upon genetic similarities, and we're going to call that phylogeny. So the percentage of shared DNA. If two species share a lot of DNA, they're going to be very taxonomically closely sort of organized, categorized. If two species don't share very much DNA, they're going to be more separate in different separate categories. So phylogeny, or sometimes it's termed as phylogenetics. That is how taxonomy is conducted today. So very rarely do people just rely on morphology. This phylogenetics is 2021 and onwards. If you decide to stay in this field, that's what you will do, right? You will analyze DNA sequences and you develop phylogenetic trees. So again, phylogenetics, the study of the evolutionary history and relationships among organisms. So using DNA to estimate the history and the relationships of the evolutionary past of these species, right? So it involves DNA. It has kind of overruled morphology. When it's presented, right? It's presented as a diagrammatic hypothesis of the evolutionary relationship of a group of organisms. So from past to more recent, right? So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different species. And we know that species 3 and 4 are going to be a little bit closer phylogenetically. They share more DNA because they're close together. There's some sort of common ancestor between 3 and 4. 4 is not as close to 2, and 4 is most distant to 1. But yet, they all have some genetic lineage that binds them together. So they all have this common ancestor, but this one's separated out first. Something happened, then we have some mutation, some selective pressure, some gene flow, some drift that separated out that one, right? And again, this is overlapping now DNA, it's overlapping evolutionary concepts and ecology as well. So giving us these genetic categories, phylogenetic tree, trying to give us an idea of how these species evolved, the oldest species and then the newer species. So I want you to get practice developing these trees, right? So we know that if two organisms are phylogenetically similar, they share a lot of DNA, they're going to also look morphologically similar. They're going to look physically similar. Right? So a leopard and a cat do share a lot of DNA, and it's kind of, I mean, they're different, yes, but they do have a lot of similarities. A cat shares some DNA with a wolf, but not as much. So you can see the cat is a little bit more separate than the wolf there. And then a cat does share some DNA with a turtle, but not that much. So it's a farther link there. So this is what these phylogenetic trees sort of are based on. So if you're given multiple species, right, typically the student has to decide, well, which of those is the most different? Which one has the most differences compared to everything else? So we're going to designate that as the out group. So we have a turtle that is going to be kind of a, yes, it has some DNA shared, but very little compared to the cat. So we have the turtle, and then what's left now, the horse, the wolf, the leopard, and the cat. Well, of those, the horse is most distinct. So at this sort of area here, we see that the turtle doesn't have fur or hair. They all do. So that's going to be a unifying quality, unifying trait. Everything to the right of that branch would have hair. So horse has hair, wolf has hair, leopard has hair, cat has hair or fur, right? So now we need to see what separates the horse from the other three. Well, the horse doesn't eat meat. It's an herbivore. Everything else eats meat. So carnivorous, meat-eating teeth. What separates the wolf from the cats? The cats can retract their claws. The dogs have non-retractable claws. So these two cats can retract their claws. Wolf cannot. So that separates the wolf out. And then what separates the leopard from the domestic cat? The ability to purr, right? Cats can purr, like their little motors running. Leopards cannot do that. Imagine if they could, it'd be a super loud, like sort of diesel engine sounding thing. But again, the idea of phylogeny, trying to give some logical evolutionary representation on an older species and then a more evolved species to the right. So hope, again, this is making sense. So here we have two phylogenetic trees of the same organisms. This is an old phylogenetic tree. I should not say phylogenetic tree, a morphologic tree based just on shape, right? So these are two fossils, so they put them kind of close together. The dolphin's next to this creature, hippopotamus is close to the pig, and the camel is close to this antelope here, right? So that one was based on shape, color, size, length of legs, body weight, all that kind of stuff, yeah, morphology. Now, after blood was taken from these creatures, after we analyzed DNA from all these organisms, a very different tree was generated, right? But we say this is a more accurate representation, and this actually shows genetic relationships, shared DNA, and this would be the phylogenetic tree. So this is what has been done. A lot of the old timers trees have been modified into these new phylogenetic trees. So the hippo and the pig, you see, well, they're not as close as what we thought, right? As far as the DNA is concerned, pigs are not that closely related to hippos. Here we had camels and antelopes. Well, they're a little bit close, but not as close as what we thought. They don't share a common ancestor right at that first branch, right? So they're a little bit more distantly related. So this is what we use today, phylogeny. If you've used the programs, what is it, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, this is what they do. They analyze your DNA and they compare it to others that have used the program that are related to you, right? And this person is estimated to be your first cousin, or this person might be a third cousin based on what percentage of DNA that they share with you. So when you do these types of genetic analyses, this is what you get. It's a lot of A's and T's and C's and G's. And then they try to compare, well, based on this strand and this strand, how many differences are there? So how similar are these strands? How similar are these strands? How similar are these strands from one to the other? It can be very tedious, but they have these real fancy computers that do all this stuff now. And very quickly they can generate a specific number. You and your parent are, you know, this much percentage equal. You share this much percentage DNA. You and your sister share this much DNA. You and your third cousin share this much DNA. This is all part of genetic analysis and phylogeny. So coming now to our invertebrate trees, there's our little fruit fly down here. So we can see all of these names, right? And if we don't know the names, it doesn't mean a whole lot to us, right? So this is where we're going to have to learn some of these species names throughout the semester. We're going to have to learn some of these similarities, right? So this is the sort of the phylogenetic branches that lead to the mosquitoes. And mosquitoes they fly, but they're different than the fruit flies, right? So the fruit flies all down here, Drosophila. So these are the melanogaster, the black butt down here. So that's, again, showing us the different types of sort of representations that we're going to see throughout the semester with these phylogenetic trees. I couldn't scan this one the way I wanted, but it is still visible here. But on page 21 of your book, figure 2.2, this is a big, it looks kind of, I know it looks messy, it looks like a lot of stuff, but it's a very profound phylogenetic tree. It contains a tremendous amount of information here, but this is the tree that the rest of the course will be based upon. This is the tree that I will lecture off of. and unfortunately, it's too many little names, too many groups. We're not going to have time to get into every single individual group, but I am going to present the large significant groups. Yeah. So we are going to start here, and there's some uncertainty as to which one came first, the ctenophores or the porifera. I'm actually going to start next week discussing the poriferans, the sponges, right? And then we're going to kind of go in a little bit of sequence, and I'm going to kind of hop around, skip some groups, and try to present this in a way that makes the most logical sense to you, right? But this is the tree. You can follow along in the syllabus as to which groups we're gonna get into in what sequence. Now, the ones we're not going to get into are these chordates. So the chordates, if you remember, these are the ones with backbones. So this is the like the whales and the craniata, like humans, we fall under this category. So this is not part of a invertebrate zoology course. This is part of a vertebrate zoology course. So we're not going to get into this branch right here, but we are going to cover and hit aspects of the rest of the tree there. But we'll get to that with time, right? And as we get through chapter through chapter through chapter. But everything that we cover from here on out will be based on these three themes, right? Taxonomy, ecology, and evolution. So for this first exam, I want you to be very, very fluent, very comfortable with these themes and being able to apply them in multiple situations. And then we'll get into the specific groups as we progress through the semester. But with that, that concludes our discussion here now. And I'll get these posted, and then I'll be sending out an announcement. So keep an eye out for that. But with that, you'll have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you next time.